The night had wrapped the city in a velvet hush, the kind that feels sacred, like the world itself was holding its breath. The clock had just struck 12, and in that moment, silence didn't feel empty, it felt alive. Emma sat on the balcony, wrapped in a thin blanket, her cup of coffee gone cold long ago. She wasn't waiting for anything, not really, but her heart was restless, heavy with unsaid things. The moon hung above her like a patient listener, the stars blinking softly, as though urging her to speak what she'd buried for too long. Across the street, the quiet hum of life continued. Cars in the distance, a dog barking faintly, but here, in her little world, time had slowed down. Her phone buzzed once. The name that lit up the screen made her chest tighten. Ethan. It had been months since they'd spoken, and yet, the sight of his name still made her pulse quicken the way it used to when everything between them was simple. She hesitated, staring at the glowing letters, her thumb hovering above the screen. Finally, she opened the message. It read, "Are you awake?" Simple. Soft. But it carried the weight of everything they'd never said. Her reply came slower. "Yeah. Couldn't sleep." Seconds turned to a minute before 3 dots appeared, typing. She could almost imagine him now, sitting somewhere in his dimly lit room. Probably with
I
that
remember
same
that
furrow
day
between
at
his
the
brows
lake,
when he was thinking too hard.
under the stars.
Same here, he replied.
I remember
Can
it
we
too.
talk? Her heart raced. It was the kind of question that felt like a door creaking open to the past, to all the memories she had sealed away for her own peace. But something inside her, something fragile and aching, wanted to hear him out. Maybe it was closure she needed, or maybe it was just the comfort of a familiar voice on a sleepless night. She typed, "Call me." The phone rang seconds later. When she answered, the
Hello?
silence between them was thick, like the night itself was listening. Hey, he said, his voice low, almost careful. Hey, she replied, her tone softer than she meant it to be. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but heavy with everything that didn't need to be said aloud. They both knew what this was, two people, once bound by love, now divided by time and choices, meeting again in the only hour where the
It's
world
funny
felt
how
quiet
some
enough for
nights
honesty.
feel like they
Ethan
hold
finally spoke.
all the secrets
You still
of the
drink
world.
coffee this late? Emma smiled faintly. Old habits don't change that easily. I remember, he said. You used to say coffee was your way of keeping the night alive. And you used to tease me for it, she whispered. Yeah, he laughed lightly, the sound
I
soft and
guess
familiar.
some things never
Guess I did.
change.
The small talk faded into something deeper, like slipping into old waters. They began to talk about random things, their jobs, the
Did you
books
hear
they were
that?
reading, the music
I
they
did.
couldn't stop listening to. But beneath every word was something unspoken, a quiet current of emotion neither could ignore. Every now and then, their voices would soften, and a pause would stretch long enough to feel like a memory breathing between them. Emma found herself studying the way he said her name, how it still carried warmth even after everything.
Emma.
She realized that while time had changed so much, some things had remained untouched, the tone of his voice,
Do you ever
the way he
think
listened,
about
the
that
care hidden
night?
behind his words. At one point, Ethan
The
asked,
one at the
"Do you ever
lake?"
think about that night? The one at the lake?" Emma's breath caught. Of course, she remembered. It was the night everything between them had changed. The stars had been
I
brighter,
miss you,
the air
Emma.
cooler, and their hearts open in
I
a way
miss
they
you
hadn't been
too.
synced. Sometimes, she said quietly,
More
more
often
often than I admit. I think about it too, he confessed. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't walked away. There it was, the truth hovering between them, fragile but undeniable. Emma leaned back in her chair, staring at the stars, feeling the ache of nostalgia sink into her chest. Maybe we needed to, she said softly. Sometimes walking away is the only way to understand what you had. Ethan didn't respond right away. She could hear the faint sound of him breathing on the other end, slow and steady, like he was trying to gather words that wouldn't come easily. Finally, he said, "I don't think I ever stopped caring, Em." Her heart twisted. "Neither did I," she admitted, barely a whisper. For a long time, they said nothing more. The night held their silence, and in that silence, something unspoken passed between them, something tender, bittersweet, and real. Maybe love doesn't always need grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes, it just needs a midnight call, a quiet voice, and the courage to say what the heart has been whispering all along. The night deepened around them, the air outside soft with wind and distant rain. Somewhere beyond her balcony, thunder rolled faintly, low and gentle like a heartbeat. Emma pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, her phone pressed to her ear, holding on to Ethan's silence. It wasn't the awkward kind, their pauses had always been full of meaning, like both were listening for something only they could hear. She could almost imagine him there, sitting across from her like old times, his hair slightly messy, his eyes tracing her face in that quiet way that made her feel seen. It was strange, she thought, how someone could still feel so close even after miles and months. Maybe love doesn't really leave, maybe it just changes shape, hides itself in memories and echoes of laughter that never quite fade. Do you ever regret it? Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts, low and uncertain. Regret what? She asked, though she already knew. Letting it end. Us. Her throat tightened. The word us felt like a ghost, familiar yet gone. She took a slow breath, her voice steady when she finally spoke. Sometimes. But I think we both did what we thought was right. He sighed. I told myself that too. But it never really felt right, you know? It felt like I was forcing myself to move on when my heart was still back there with you. Emma closed her eyes. The honesty in his tone hit her harder than she expected. Ethan, she began, but her words trailed off. What could she say? That she had missed him every night but pretended she hadn't? That every time she saw a shooting star, she still wished he'd find happiness even if it wasn't with her? Some truths were too heavy to voice. He continued softly, you once told me that love doesn't end just because people stop talking. I didn't believe you then. But now, I think you were right. She smiled faintly. You remembered that. I remember everything, he said. The way you'd always look for the moon when you couldn't sleep. The way you'd hum when you were nervous. The way you'd tuck your hair behind your ear before saying something honest. It's all still there. His words wrapped around her like warmth, and for a moment, she didn't feel lonely anymore. You always notice the small things, she murmured. That's because the small things were the best parts, he replied. Big moments fade. But it's the little ones that stay. The rain outside began to fall harder, its rhythm soft and steady against the balcony rails. The world seemed to shrink until it was just them, two hearts, one call, and the sound of rain tying them together again. Emma spoke after a long pause. Do you think we could have made it work if we'd tried harder? Ethan hesitated. Maybe. Or maybe we needed to break so we could become who we are now. She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening in the dim light. Maybe you're right. But that doesn't make it hurt less, he added. No, she whispered. It doesn't. There was something raw in their honesty, something that made the moment sacred. Neither tried to fix the past, they simply sat with it, letting the truth breathe. Sometimes, that was the bravest thing love could do, to face what was lost without bitterness. Ethan's voice softened. You know what's strange? Even after all this time, I still feel calm when I hear you. Like nothing's changed. Emma smiled through the ache in her chest. That's because some things don't change, Ethan. Not really. They just wait. He exhaled slowly, the sound of it mixing with the rain. You always had a way with words. You always had a way of understanding them, she replied. Another silence followed, this one tender, filled with shared memories. She thought about their first night together by the lake, how they'd stayed up till sunrise talking about everything and nothing. They had promised each other then that no matter where life took them, they'd never lose the part of themselves that believed in love. And here they were, years later, holding on to that promise in a different way. I miss that night, she said softly. Not just because it was beautiful, but because it was honest. We were honest with each other back then. I miss it too, he said. But I think tonight feels a little like that again. Her lips curved into a faint, trembling smile. Yeah, it does. Lightning flashed in the distance, a brief burst of silver illuminating her balcony. For a second, she could see her reflection in the window, eyes tired but alive, heart open in a way it hadn't been for a long time. She realized then that maybe love didn't always need to come back to life, it could simply remind you that it had never really died. As the thunder rolled again, Ethan's voice came through, soft but steady. "Emma, do you think some people are meant to find their way back to each other?" She hesitated, her breath catching in her throat. "I think some hearts never stop trying." For the first time in months, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the universe had brought them back to this moment for a reason. And as the rain fell harder, she whispered, "Maybe that's what midnight is for, to remind us that even in the darkest hours, love still knows our names." The honesty of her words lingered between them like a wound reopened. But neither turned away. It was strange how the same voice that once made her heart race could now make her ache. Yet, it was an ache she welcomed. Because it meant she still cared. Because it meant that some part of her heart was still alive, still reaching for him through miles of silence. Ethan's tone deepened, roughened slightly by emotion. "When we started drifting apart, I thought it was just distance. Work, life, timing. But now, I think it was something quieter. Maybe we just stopped saying what we really felt." Emma nodded even though he couldn't see her. "You're right. We both got good at pretending things were fine. I didn't want to lose you, so I smiled even when I was breaking. And you," she hesitated, then finished. "You started fading. You were there, but not with me." "I know," he said, guilt heavy in his tone. "I thought being strong meant being silent. I didn't realize that silence can be the loudest way to lose someone." Her chest tightened. She wanted to tell him that she had spent so many nights replaying their arguments, the missed calls, the half-written texts that never got sent. She wanted to tell him how she had searched for him in every stranger's face, in every love song that played when she was alone. But she didn't. Some feelings didn't need words, they were already known. "Do you hate me for walking away?" he asked quietly. "No," she said after a pause. "I hated the way it ended. But I never hated you. You can't hate someone who once felt like home." Ethan drew in a breath that trembled slightly. "You were my home too." The weight of his confession settled in her heart like rain finding the earth. For the first time, she realized that maybe he had carried the same quiet pain she did, that their stories hadn't ended in separation, only paused in misunderstanding. "I used to write letters to you," he said suddenly. Her eyes widened. "You did?" "Yeah. I never sent them. They were just thoughts. Things I wanted to say but couldn't find the courage to." "What did you write?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He laughed softly, almost shyly. "That I missed your laugh. That I still looked for you in crowds. That every time I saw a full moon, I wondered if you were looking at it too." Emma bit her lip, tears welling in her eyes. "I was," she admitted. "Almost every night." For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The sound of rain filled the silence, steady and comforting. It was as if the world had paused to give them this one last chance to unburden their hearts. "I never stopped believing in us," Ethan said finally. "Even when I told myself to. Even when I tried to love someone else. It never felt the same." Emma's heart thudded painfully. "Why are you telling me all this now?" "Because I can't keep pretending I don't feel it anymore," he confessed. "Because tonight feels like that night at the lake, and I don't want to let it pass without saying what I should have said then." Her breath trembled. "And what's that?" "That I still love you." The words hit her like a pulse of warmth through the cold night. Simple, yet they carried years of silence, regret, and longing. Emma's hand shook slightly as she gripped the phone tighter. She wanted to say it back, but something held her still, the fear that love might not be enough this time. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You can't just say that after everything." "I know," he said softly. "But it's the truth. And maybe it doesn't change anything, but I needed you to know." Her eyes filled with tears, blurring the lights of the city below. "You always had the worst timing," she said with a sad smile. "Maybe," he murmured. "Or maybe this is exactly when we were supposed to talk again." The rain finally stopped. The night air turned cooler, quieter. Somewhere far away, a train passed, its sound fading into the distance. Emma took a deep breath, her heart caught between past and possibility. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but right now, this midnight, this call, this fragile truth, felt like a piece of the closure she never got. Or maybe, It was the beginning of something new. As she looked up at the moon peeking through clouds, she whispered, maybe love never really leaves. Maybe it just waits for the right time to speak again. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and blooming jasmine through the night. Emma closed her eyes, inhaling it deeply. It felt like the world itself was breathing with her, alive and listening. On the other end of the call, Ethan had gone quiet again, but it wasn't an uneasy silence, it was full of emotion, of words that hovered between them, unspoken yet known. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady, like she had finally gathered the strength to face the truth she'd been avoiding for so long. Ethan, she began, do you really think love is enough to start over? He didn't answer right away. The sound of his sigh came through the speaker, slow and heavy, like he was exhaling everything he'd been holding back. I don't know, he said finally. I used to think love could fix anything. That if we cared enough, tried enough, it would all fall into place. But now I think love isn't about fixing, it's about understanding. About being brave enough to stay, even when things don't make sense. Emma let the words sink in. That sounds like something you'd say now. You've changed. Maybe I had to, he said. Maybe losing you forced me to grow up. I realized love isn't just saying I miss you. It's learning how not to break what you hold dear. Her throat tightened. You broke me once. I know, he whispered. And I've been trying to forgive myself ever since. There was something about the way he said it, so vulnerable, so honest, that it made her heart ache. For the first time, she wasn't angry anymore. Maybe she never truly had been. Maybe she was just hurt because the person she trusted most had forgotten how to fight for her. I wasn't perfect either, she admitted. I pushed you away when all I wanted was for you to pull me closer. That's what hurt the most, he said. Knowing you wanted me, but feeling like you didn't. They both went quiet again, caught in that delicate tension between past pain and present understanding. Outside, the moon slipped out from behind the clouds, casting silver light across her face. It felt almost poetic, like the universe was giving them just enough brightness to see each other clearly again, even through the distance. Do you think, she asked slowly, we could ever go back to the way things were? Ethan's voice was firm but gentle. No. We can't. But maybe we're not supposed to. Maybe we could be something better this time. Something stronger. Emma's eyes stung. She didn't know if she was crying because of hope or fear. And what if it doesn't work? Then at least we'll know we tried, he said. Not out of nostalgia, not out of loneliness, but because our hearts still recognize each other. That line lingered in her chest like music. She could almost see him now, sitting somewhere with that same earnest expression, looking up at the same moon. For the first time in years, she let herself imagine what it would feel like to see him again, to stand close enough to feel his heartbeat, to see if the connection they once had still lived in the space between them. You sound different tonight, she said quietly. How so? More real. More sure. He chuckled softly. That's because I finally stopped running from the truth. You've always been the place I come back to, Emma. Even when I told myself I was over you. Her heart ached at the sincerity in his words. She wanted to say it back, to tell him she never stopped loving him, but fear held her. Love was beautiful, yes, but it was also unpredictable. And she didn't know if she could survive losing him again. Ethan seemed to sense her hesitation. I'm not asking for promises, he said gently. I just want to know if there's still a part of you that believes in us. Her voice trembled when she spoke. There's not just a part, Ethan. There's a whole heart that never stopped believing. The line went silent for a heartbeat. Then she heard it, his breath catching, a quiet laugh of disbelief, the kind people make when hope suddenly feels real again. God, Emma, he murmured. You have no idea what it means to hear you say that. She smiled through her tears. Maybe I do. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The night was still, holding their silence like a secret. In that stillness, something shifted, not backward toward what they once were, but forward toward what they could still become. The past hadn't vanished, it had transformed into something gentler, something that could finally coexist with the present. I wish you were here, he said softly. I wish we could talk like this face to face. She looked up at the stars. Maybe we will. Someday. Someday, he repeated, as if the word itself was a promise. The sound of his voice, warm and steady, filled her heart with a peace she hadn't felt in years. Midnight had always been her loneliest hour, but tonight it felt different. It felt alive, full of quiet miracles and unspoken forgiveness. And as the moonlight spilled across her balcony, Emma realized that sometimes, love doesn't end, it just waits for courage to return. And maybe, just maybe, this was the night theirs finally had. The first hint of dawn began to touch the horizon, faint streaks of silver and rose blending softly into the fading dark. Emma hadn't noticed how long they had been talking, but time had lost meaning somewhere between laughter, silence, and the tears they didn't hide anymore. It was strange how hours could feel like moments when your heart was finally unburdening itself. She leaned back against the cold metal of the balcony chair, her phone still warm against her ear. The world around her was beginning to stir, the chirp of a bird, the distant hum of an early bus, but the world within her felt suspended in stillness. Ethan's voice came through again, softer now, filled with a peace she hadn't heard from him in years. "Remember what you used to say about dawn?" he asked. Emma smiled faintly, eyes half closed. "That it's just the night's way of saying goodbye gently." He chuckled quietly. "Yeah. You always made darkness sound so poetic." "Maybe because I always believed light meant more when you came out of it," she said. He paused for a moment, and when he spoke again, his tone carried something deeper, something like gratitude. "Thank you for tonight. For talking to me. For letting me remember what real feels like again." Her heart softened. "You don't have to thank me. Maybe we both needed this. To talk. To understand. To let go of what hurt and hold on to what still matters." "I don't want to let go," he admitted. "Not this time." His honesty hit her like a pulse of warmth. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she listened to the calmness of his breathing, to the world awakening outside her window, to the soft thrum of her own heart that still beat his name. "Maybe we don't have to let go," she said quietly. "Maybe we just have to start again, without pretending this time." He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "If we start again, I don't want it to be like before. I don't want half love or almost love. I want to show up fully, every day. I want to fight when things get hard instead of walking away. I want it to be real." Her eyes glistened with tears, but they were no longer heavy or sad, they felt cleansing, like rain washing away old pain. "Then we start real," she whispered. "No expectations. No promises we can't keep. Just truth." He let out a shaky laugh. "You always knew how to make everything sound right." "Not right," she corrected softly. "Just honest." The line went quiet again, but it wasn't the kind of silence that ended things, it was the kind that began something new. She could almost feel his smile through the phone. Somewhere deep down, she knew that whatever happened after tonight, this moment would stay with her forever, the night when love didn't return as a storm, but as calm rain. "You know," Ethan said after a while, his voice lighter, "I always wondered how our story would end." Emma smiled faintly. "Who said it's ending?" He laughed. "Maybe you're right. Maybe this is just another chapter. Midnight always writes the best ones," she said. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world was quiet except for the faint rustle of dawn's breeze and the distant echo of life returning to the city. She could see the horizon now, a soft blush of pink spilling into the sky. It felt symbolic, as if the universe itself was turning the page for them. "Ethan," she said softly. "Yeah. I forgive you." The words left her lips effortlessly, and the moment they did, something inside her broke free. She hadn't realized how much of her heart had been trapped by resentment, by the what-ifs and almosts of their past. But forgiveness felt like light, gentle, warm, healing. He inhaled sharply, caught off guard. "Emma, I don't deserve that." "Maybe not," she said with a sad smile. "But that's what love does, it gives, even when it doesn't make sense." He was silent for a few seconds before whispering, "Then I forgive you too. For walking away. For needing space. For everything." Tears blurred her vision again, but this time they felt different, lighter. "So, what now?" she asked softly. Ethan's voice came through steady and sure. "Now, we see where life takes us. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe next year. But no matter what happens, I'll always be grateful for tonight. For us. She closed her eyes, letting his words settle deep within her. Me too. The sky had fully shifted now, golden light brushing against the rooftops, the moon fading like a memory. For the first time in a long while, she felt peaceful, like her heart had finally found balance between what was and what could be. She wasn't sure if they'd meet again, or if this was the last chapter of their story. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that they had found honesty again, that love, however fragile, had spoken one last time beneath the midnight sky. As the first rays of sunlight touched her face, she whispered, "Good night, Ethan." He chuckled softly. "It's morning, Emma." She smiled. Then, "Good morning." There was warmth in his reply. "Good morning." And with that, the call ended. But the silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full of peace. The night that began with questions had ended with truth. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, two hearts had remembered how to speak again.